Welcome back to the Golden 70s, where legends were born, rules were broken, and history was never quiet. Now look, we've all seen modern villains. We've got purple aliens, snapping fingers, and guys in tech suits flying around. It's great. It's spectacle. But there is a very specific, very haunting brand of bad guy that only the 1970s could produce. I'm talking about the villains who didn't live in space or a secret volcano lair. They lived in the apartment next door. They sat behind the desk at the bank. They were the ones driving the taxi. The 1970s was a decade where the monster wasn't under the bed. The monster was the bed, or the guy selling you the bed, or the system that made the bed. It was a time of pure, unadulterated cinematic paranoia. Before we get into this deep dive into the darkest corners of the silver screen, make sure you subscribe to the Golden 70s. We're peeling back the polyester and looking at the grit underneath. Because honestly, you're not ready for how much these characters still hit today. Let's get into it. To understand why 70s villains feel so visceral, we have to look at what came before. In the 40s and 50s, villains were easy to spot. They had thin mustaches, capes, or maybe they were just a giant radioactive lizard. There was a clear line. You had the good guy in the white hat and the bad guy in the black hat. Then the 1960s happened. Everything got messy. But by the time we hit 1970, that messy turned into a full-blown identity crisis for the American psyche. We had Vietnam, Watergate, and an economy that was essentially doing a slow-motion faceplant. Suddenly, the villain wasn't a foreign invader. The villain was the guy in the suit telling you everything was fine while he stole your pension. In 1971, we got Dirty Harry. Now technically, Harry Callahan is the hero, but let's be real, the villain, Scorpio, played by Andy Robinson, was a wake-up call. Scorpio wasn't a mastermind. He was a twitchy, terrifyingly realistic personification of the random violence people were starting to fear on their own streets. There's this one scene where Scorpio pays someone to beat him up just so he can frame the police. Let that sink in. That is a level of doing the most that we hadn't seen in cinema. It wasn't about world domination. It was about pure, chaotic spite. I mean, honestly, Scorpio is basically the original troll, but with a sniper rifle instead of a Twitter account. It's wild to watch that now and realize how much it tapped into the urban decay fear of the time. Now let's talk about a villain that doesn't have a face. In the 70s, the scariest thing wasn't always a person, it was the system. Take Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, 1975. Louise Fletcher didn't need a chainsaw or a mask. She had a clipboard and a soft voice. That is low-key the scariest thing I've ever seen. She represents the banality of evil. She truly believes she's the good guy. She thinks she's providing order. But she's actually crushing the human spirit with a polite smile and a scheduled medication run. Be honest, we've all had a boss or a teacher who gave off major Nurse Ratched vibes, right? That person who uses the rules as a weapon? It's a specific kind of trauma. Watching McMurphy fight her is like watching a man try to punch a fog. You can't hurt it, but it's suffocating you. This leads us to the corporate and political villains. Look at The Parallax View, 1974, or All the President's Men, 1976. These films treated the government or the corporation as a slasher villain. There's no one person to fight. It's just a shadowy hallway and a phone line that's being tapped. In the 70s, the too real villain was often just a guy in a mid-range sedan following you. It's that feeling of being watched. It's the realization that the people in charge aren't just incompetent. They're actively rooting for your downfall. The 1970s pioneered the bureaucratic villain, where the antagonist is an immovable institution rather than a single person. This is where it gets really sideways. The 70s loved the anti-hero, but they also loved the, wait, is this guy actually the villain trope? Let's talk about Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver, 1976. Robert De Niro plays a guy who is lonely, forgotten, and slowly losing his grip. At the time, audiences didn't know how to feel. Is he a hero? Is he a monster? Watching Taxi Driver today is a trip. Travis is the ultimate I'm the main character guy. but in the worst way possible. He's staring in the mirror saying, "You talking to me?" And we're all sitting here like, "Well, my guy, literally no one is talking to you. Please go outside and touch some grass." But the scary part? He feels real. We've all seen that guy on the subway. We've all felt that isolation. The 70s took that relatability and turned it into a nightmare. By the end of the movie, he's celebrated as a hero by the media, which is the ultimate 70s chef's kiss of irony. The movie is basically saying, the world is so broken it can't tell the difference between a savior and a ticking time bomb. And then you have Michael Corleone in The Godfather Part 2, 1974. In the first movie, you're rooting for him. He's the war hero coming home. By the end of the second movie, he's sitting alone in a chair, having killed his own brother, looking like a husk of a human being. Michael Corleone is the patron saint of, "It seemed like a good idea at the time." He's the villain who thinks he's doing it all for his family, while literally destroying his family. It's the ultimate "congratulations, you played yourself" of cinema history. We can't talk about 70s villains without talking about the one that made everyone afraid to go into the water. Jaws, 1975. Now you might say, but it's a shark. That's not a real villain. Wrong. The shark in Jaws isn't a character, it's a consequence. It's an invisible force of nature that reminds us how small we are. But the real villain of Jaws, it's Mayor Vaughn, the guy who refuses to close the beaches because of town economy. Tell me this doesn't sound like a bad idea already. Hey, there's a giant man-eating fish, but think of the saltwater taffy sales. Mayor Vaughn is the spiritual father of every modern politician who ignores a crisis for a better Q3 report. He's too real it hurts. Then you have the villains of the road movies. Think of the truck driver in Steven Spielberg's Duel, 1971. You never see his face. You just see this grimy, smoke-belching tanker truck terrorizing a guy in a Plymouth Valiant. It's the villain as a machine. It's the feeling of being hunted by something that doesn't have a motive. It doesn't want your money. It doesn't want to rule the world. It just wants to run you off the road because you're there. But yeah, that was only the warm-up. Because in the late 70s, the too real villain evolved into something even more intimate. As the decade wound down, the villains moved from the city streets and the oceans right into the backyard. 1978 gave us Michael Myers in Halloween. Before this, horror villains were often the other, monsters from space, vampires from Transylvania. John Carpenter changed the game by putting the villain in a quiet Illinois suburb. Michael Myers is the shape. He has no personality. He has no tragic backstory, at least in the original. He's just the darkness that lives in the house across the street. There is something so low-key terrifying about the 70s version of suburbia. The long shadows, the wood-paneled walls, the babysitters just trying to watch TV. Halloween took the safety of the American dream and showed us that a thin wooden door isn't going to save you. And we have to mention Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. This movie feels like a documentary. It's sweaty, it's loud, and it feels like you can smell the rust. Leatherface isn't a supervillain. He's a victim of a twisted family dynamic who happens to have a power tool. Honestly, the dinner scene in that movie is the most stressful thing ever filmed. It's not even about the gore. It's about the sheer screaming insanity of it. It's the villainy of a world that has completely lost its mind. By the end of the 70s, villains had moved from political figures to the silent, unstoppable forces hiding in plain sight within our own communities. So why do we still care? Why do these villains from 40 or 50 years ago still keep us up at night? It's because the 70s didn't give us easy answers. In a modern blockbuster, the villain usually loses, the hero gets a quip, and the world is saved. In the 1970s, the villain often won, or even worse, the hero won, but lost their soul in the process. These villains felt real because they were built out of our actual anxieties. Fear of the government, fear of our neighbors, fear of ourselves. They weren't caricatures, they were mirrors. If this story made you laugh or think, even a little, a like helps more than you think. It tells the algorithm that people actually care about the craft of storytelling. And if you enjoy these deep dives into the grit, the glamour, and the absolute chaos of the best decade in film, subscribe to the Golden 70s. We're keeping this era alive together. The 70s showed us that the real monsters don't always wear masks. Sometimes they wear badges. Sometimes they wear suits. And sometimes they're just standing behind you in the grocery store line, waiting. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you in the next one. Because some decades fade, but the 70s, they echo forever.